It's flashing red.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to our Friends of the Kent Constitution, Greater Boston Friends of Kent Constitution monthly luncheon here in beautiful Reading, Massachusetts. And we have two great speakers today. Both of them originally from Communist China. Diane Liu, and both of them, by the way, are Falun Gong practitioners. Now, Diane, I probably met you more than once, but she organized the rally, the protest against the communist flag raising in Boston City Hall Plaza, which we proudly participated in. And she'll talk a little bit about that. And Michael Fang. I've known Michael for about 15 years, and he's spoken on behalf of us, and I've actually spoken to their groups over the years. They're going to be talking about some of the horrible atrocities that the Chinese communists are committing, not just in China, but also the tentacles in this country. This is why politicians like Marty Walsh, people in the City Council of Boston, Philadelphia, and other cities and states around the country are basically kowtowing to the Chinese communists. So let's give them, it takes a lot of courage to do what they do, and I want to just give them a nice warm hand. And
Okay, so basically there's two parts to this book. Basically, there's going to be two parts to this presentation. I will speak about the persecution of Falun Gong inside China and outside China, and then Diana will talk about the resistance put up by Falun Gong practitioners in China as well as abroad. Okay. For thousands of years, the practice of Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism has been the core of its civilization. It is reflected in its art, literature, its governance, and culture. When the communists took over China, they erased all that, forcing people to be atheistic and live according to communist ideology. When Mr. Liongji introduced Falun Gong in China in 1992, Qigong was at its peak of popularity. Though it was similar to other Qigong practices with gentle moving exercises with the goal of gaining better health and fitness, Falun Gong differed tremendously in its core with a set of moral teachings and emphasized truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, which are also core tenets shared by Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Many people recognize that this was a revival of the ancient good things of China, a renaissance of Chinese traditional culture. And in 1998, just a few years after its introduction, Chinese government survey found 70 to 100 million people were practicing Falun Gong. Falun Gong in its initial years was under the auspices of the official China Qigong Research Association, which gave it permission to be taught throughout society. It was then taught in Chinese embassy overseas with invitation by its ambassadors in Paris, Stockholm, Gothenburg, and New York City. The book Zhuan Falun, which is the core text of the practice, was a national bestseller. In China's Ministry of Security especially praised the practice. The speed of its popularity, however, irked several high-ranking officials in the Central Politburo, especially the then President and Chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, Jiang Zemin. Jiang was not the first or second pick by Deng Xiaoping to succeed the CCP leadership. He was the third and last resort, and only because he had supported the Tiananmen massacre. His political power was obscure coming into the chairmanship, and he needed to raise his political standing. He was immensely jealous of Falun Gong's popularity and picked what he thought was an easy target as a means to raise his political standing. The book Zhuan Falun eventually was banned, and the state-controlled media started vilifying the practice of Falun Gong. The internal division among Chinese political leadership became more obvious as both positive reports on Falun Gong and attack on Falun Gong were broadcast alongside each other in state-run media. Falun Gong has hundreds of benefits for the Chinese people and nation, and does not a bit of harm. proclaimed Xiao Qi, a former Politburo member and a chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, and joined by other senior members of the Congress. April 1999, an article appeared in Tianjin City deriding Falun Gong. Falun Gong practitioners then held a sit-in from April 19 to 24 outside the newspaper's office to request a retraction, which is a lawful tactic that had resulted retractions elsewhere in China in the late 1990s. This time, however, the Public Security Bureau of Tianjin dispatched riot police to beat up Falun Gong practitioners, resulting in injury and the arrest of 45 people. We are told that the police acted upon instruction from Beijing and that the arrested practitioners could not be released without authorization from Beijing. The Tianjin police suggested Falun Gong practitioners go to the capital to resolve the problem, not knowing at the time that this was a setup. On April 25th, 10,000 to 20,000 Falun Gong practitioners gathered peacefully outside the government's Central Appeals Office. When they arrived, they were directed by security forces to assemble outside the central government compound, Zhongnanhai. Several Falun Gong adherents met with the then Premier Zhu Rongji and other top leaders to request that the harassment and restrictions on publishing Falun Gong teaching end, and that the Tianjin practitioners be released. Zhu assured those present that the party was not opposed to Falun Gong and agreed to the release of the detained practitioners. At dusk, Tianjin released all the detained Falun Gong practitioners in accordance to instructions from the central government. Though the matter seemed settled at that time, Jiang Zemin responded very differently and reprimanded Premier Zhu. Jiang was reportedly angered and disturbed by the size and independence of the practice. Jiang resolved that evening that the Communist Party must eradicate Falun Gong. After a standoff between the party's Politburo, the majority of which were opposed to a crackdown on Falun Gong, Jiang labeled the practice a threat to the party and said it would be an international loss of faith if Falun Gong were not immediately crushed. Thus, the CCP misrepresented the April 25 gathering as a siege of the central government compound and politicized Falun Gong both inside China and abroad, that Falun Gong was vying for power with the Communist Party. Jiang circulated a letter among party members across China characterizing Falun Gong as a state enemy. The CCP subsequently began widespread and coordinated attack against Falun Gong practitioners. On June 10, 1999, Politburo Standing Committee established a Gestapo-like police force called the 610 Office, named for the date of its creation. It is an extra-legal organization with power above all parties' apparatuses, and from large corporations down to the smallest of neighborhood organizations, for the express purpose of coordinating and implementing the persecution of Falun Gong. Jiang's edict was to eradicate them in 3 months, defame their reputation, bankrupt them financially, and destroy them physically. Jiang tasked the 610 Office to use every means necessary, a mandate that led to what the 610 Office soon became most notorious for, that is the use of extreme torture.
Oh my God.
On July 20, 1999, hundreds of Falun Gong adherents were taken into custody by security forces. 2 days later, on July 22nd, the ban on Falun Gong was officially declared. Initially, the CCP-controlled press declared that Falun Gong was banned as a threat to social order, a superstitious and dangerous group, and its theism was not compatible to Marxist ideology. Contrary to popular belief, Falun Gong was not banned as an evil religion or evil cult. That derogatory label was applied retroactively 3 months after the crackdown began as a means of undermining public sympathy for practitioners and to justify it. The term in Chinese is heretical religion or heretical organization. The cult label was arrived at with the help of a Western PR firm. It was crafted, that is, to play off fears of cults in the West. That is a loaded label that would automatically cause people to feel guarded and keep a distance. Plus, as the world have not heard of Falun Gong before, the CCP's label and propaganda was the first exposure and the only information available. This was quite derogatory for the victims and make it hard for them to even begin to tell the world the truth what was going on. We were discredited before we could begin. Liberal media chooses to continue this label to this day despite repeated clarification. It was also hard for the world to grasp what Falun Gong is, as few are familiar with Eastern religion, not to mention what traditional Chinese culture is, as this is how the practice of Falun Gong is rooted. Many Western media reported it as a Qigong breathing exercise, but the practice has no breathing exercises. So Falun Gong became a controversial, highly misunderstood spiritual group, being demonized and vilified around the world, while its adherent in China faces a violent campaign of suppression not seen since the Cultural Revolution. A Hong Kong newspaper reported that 50,000 individuals were detained in the first week of the crackdown. In fact, during the first few weeks, Falun Gong practitioners were rounded up and held in stadiums because the sheer number of detainees could not fit into China's vast array of detention centers and prisons. In just 3 months, Chinese authorities confiscated, burned, and destroyed tens of millions of Falun Gong books, videotapes, audio cassettes, and other related material across the country. Since the beginning of the crackdown, the state-run media fabricated and saturated society with reports vilifying Falun Gong. Meanwhile, Falun Gong practitioners are being expelled from universities and fired from their jobs. Their homes are ransacked at will by police, and anyone who practices faces the real threat of being hauled away by police at any moment. All official channels for appealing to the government were closed, with nowhere else to turn. As the last resort, Falun Gong practitioners began making public appeal in Tiananmen Square. The civil disobedience assumed the form of sitting in meditation in the square, unhurled banner that reads truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, or yelling Falun Gong is good, while the police would pounce, kicked, punched, and dragged them to police vans by the hair. At first, the demonstrators were small and only occasional, but soon people were flocking to Beijing from every corner of China to step onto the square. AFP reported on February 5, 2000 that Chinese police have detained hundreds and possibly thousands of practitioners. After nearly 18 months of CCP's raging campaign, the Chinese public continued to express disdain for Jane's suppression of Falun Gong practitioners. The campaign to turn public opinion Falun Gong appeared to be destined for failure. And so Zheng and his cronies hatched a plan. January 23rd, 2001 was the eve of the Chinese New Year, and in fact, the eve of the new millennium. 5 individuals allegedly set themselves on fire in Tiananmen Square. Within hours, Chinese authorities flooded the state-run media with grisly photos of the event, claiming the self-immolators were Falun Gong practitioners. Days later, a Washington Post article revealed that at least 2 of the self-immolators had never been seen practicing Falun Gong, and further evidence uncovered in the subsequent weeks revealed the incident was staged. The United Nations IED Office, stands for Inspectional and Evaluation Division gave an official statement that we have obtained a video of that incident that in our view proved that this event was staged by the government. All these discoveries from overseas were blocked by China's internet firewall, but this incident, however, became a key tool the Chinese authority used to bend public opinion against Falun Gong. The state-run media was saturated with programs accusing the Falun Gong teaching of causing the tragedy. They blasted these propaganda in newsprint, television programs, schools, and workplace 24/7 for at least 2 years, everywhere and at all times. This is a good case study of how a society of 1.3 billion people can be indoctrinated. There was the offensive inside China, but there was equally an offensive campaign outside of China. For the first couple of years, whenever Jiang Zemin meets with the head of state or foreign dignitary, he would hand them a book of propaganda on Falun Gong. In just a few years, all independent Chinese language newspapers outside of China were bought out or have come under the wings of the Chinese Communist Party and spewing Falun Gong propaganda. The Chinese diaspora around the world have also been infiltrated to carry out its campaign of hate propaganda. Practitioners' emails were hacked, their website came under denial of service attack, phones were tapped, death threats were dished out, public vilification and physical attack appeared in New York City. A practitioner's home in Atlanta was broken into and attacked by thugs and left to die. A practitioner was chased and his heel shot off from another moving vehicle in South Africa. Falun Gong adherents were blacklisted by certain European nations and barred from entry. The bar of entry also happened in Hong Kong. It was intense, and the Western mainstream media somehow couldn't stop quoting certain verbatim of the CCP propaganda as though it has been etched into their psyche. In 2006, an employee named Annie of Sujiachuan Hospital in China made a public statement that there were 6,000 Falun Gong practitioners housed in a hospital and that her neurosurgeon ex-husband had extracted 2,000 corneas from Falun Gong practitioners before other surgeons removed other vital organs. None of the donors survived and that the bodies were then burned, which means there was no remain of witnesses or hard evidence. It was a horrendous accusation that was hard to believe, but knowing the CCP, it would be hard to put past them that they would not do something like that. Two independent investigators, David Kilgore, former Canadian Secretary of State, Asia Pacific, and David Lattis, a Canadian international human rights lawyer, launched an investigation and produced a report called Bloody Harvest 10 months later. And found from 2000 to 2004, 41,500 organs was accountable for. Another independent investigator, Ethan Gutman, found similar conclusion using a different set of investigative approach. For over 10 years, these reports rest on the accusation of insufficient conclusive evidence. But in the intervening years, much more hard evidence and witnesses have also surfaced. The new evidence points to a 20 billion hidden transplant industry with probable 100,000 victims per year. All these transplants are characterized by extreme short wait time, from a few days to a few years, or even a transplant operation scheduled ahead of time. In June 2019, an independent People's Tribunal, known as the China Tribunal, with 7 distinguished members, panel chaired by Sir Jeffrey Nice, QC, who previously led the prosecution of former Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic for war crimes at the International Criminal Tribunal, released its final judgment in June 2019 after an 18-month investigation. The tribunal concluded beyond a reasonable doubt that state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience had taken place for years in China on a significant scale, and is still taking place today. That the main organ supply came from imprisoned practitioners of the persecuted spiritual group Falun Gong. One piece of evidence presented in the report directly implicated former regime leader Jiang Zemin, who directly ordered the harvesting of organs from Falun Gong adherents. Another notable evidence was Zhu Jiabin, who was the head of the 610 office in Wudanjian, a city of Hunan province, who said, "I'm called the butcher specializing in live organ harvesting. It's nothing, just like slaughtering pigs. After scooping the organs out, I would sell them." The tribunal's chair, Jeffrey Knight, said in a statement that the judgment confirmed how all people or organizations interacting in any substantial way with the PRC should recognize that they are interacting with a criminal state. Susie Hughes, Executive Director of advocacy group International Coalition to End Transplant Abuse in China, said, "It is no longer acceptable for governments, medical bodies, and leading human rights organizations to say there is not enough evidence. The enormous task of assessing all available evidence has now been completed and is available for all to see."
Thank you, and I will continue with the current situation overseas and within China, how the Falun Gong practitioners and start their resistance, peaceful resistance in the whole world. Okay, and within China, since the persecution started in 1999, and the Falun Gong practitioners never stopped their peaceful resistance, even all this resistance is underground, because it's illegal in China to practice it. And what they do is, the Falun Gong practitioner usually have every city has their secret print house. They will print all the materials, choose materials about what is Falun Gong, how populated it is outside China, how the whole world think about Falun Gong, and because the seriously brainwashed the Chinese population because of the hate propaganda, totally poisoned. So it is very important for practitioners to clarify the truth and spread the truth, because they are the victims of the brainwash and the hatred program. It does take a high risk, because once these practitioners in China were caught, that's clarify truth face to face on the street, and they will be arrested and put in the labor camp, and they could be the victims of organ harvesting. So they are using their life to save Chinese people, and they know they believe that people have hatred against the spiritual belief, against the good people, and in this spiritual belief, they know it will get punished, from heaven. So so they said it's not for them only; it's for the people, the Chinese people, for their good future. And there's one incident happened that really impressed me. I think it's right after the 1999 the persecution started. I think the Falun Gong practitioners in North China is Jilin province. They know that the state 24 hours run the state program, propaganda program, to poison people's brain. They made a very brave action. They hijacked the state-controlled cable program in that province, the city, and they replaced the program with the Falun Gong program, which is about the truth of the Falun Gong in the rest of the world, how the Falun Gong practitioners peacefully practice in public in the Western world, even in Taiwan, and how the Falun Gong master give the lectures in America, and what is the Falun Gong about? Truthfulness, forbearance, and compassion. And the people who received this, I think it's almost 1 million audience and watch these programs, and they're shocked. They were shocked, and they even thought the persecution's over. Then the people come run on the streets say, "Oh, the persecution's over." Congratulate to the people they know, the President Falun Gong. Congratulations, the government's persecution's over. The program lasted for 45 minutes, I think. But and the cost is high because 6 of the Falun Gong practitioners, because of being involved in this program, in this incident, arrested by the Chinese government. And Jiang Zemin and the party chairman at that time said, kill all of them. And so nobody dared to do that again. Because he's so scared of the truth, you know?
Yes.
And this 6 practitioners has been tortured physically,
Oh my
really badly. And they torture you, but they don't kill you. Because they know the torture will last long. You need to suffer will be last long, right? And all of these practitioners, they eventually died in the prison. And every time I watch that program, I watch that documentary, always tears in my eye, because I know I put myself as a Falun Gong practitioner. I'm thinking about, in that situation, do I have the guts to stand up? And there were even 2 female practitioners bravely joined that, participated in that action. So that is give you an example how brave the Falun Gong practitioner they are. And the Epoch Times, the news media, we all know it's organized. By Falun Gong practitioner, and that media started in the city, down to the South China city, in Shenzhen, in a basement.
Wow.
And that time, the people who started the Epoch Times are the university students. They're very smart students. They practicing Falun Gong, and they want to break out the media control, propaganda of the Chinese government, and started this media in the basement. And I think I forgot which year they have been the government found their location, and they arrest all of them. But fortunately, this newspaper now switched to then after that switched to overseas to United States, and they continue that newspaper till now. So the Epoch Times become the major voice for the Falun Gong practitioners to disclose the truth of the persecution. It has, I think, 7 languages, right? Epoch Times. How many languages it has?
Oh, 20-something, 30 different languages all around.
And worldwide, yes. And Falun Gong practitioner.
And it's actually the largest Chinese language newspaper in the world.
Yes, and it is the only newspaper that by Chinese people that is independent from the Chinese government. If you see overseas any English version or Chinese version of the newspaper, which is Chinese that run, all of them actually is controlled by the Chinese government, except Epoch Times, because we run by the Falun Gong practitioner. And that switched to the outside China. Except the newspaper, we also, the Chinese the practitioners also started the government work. They try to tell the government that the stories they told about the Chinese government about Falun Gong all fake. And that effort actually turned out to be a good result, because not just the United States, but the United States Congress passed a resolution condemning organ harvesting and the persecution of Falun Gong as early as 2008, I think, right?
Yeah, I think there's a I think it's 2008.
Yes, there are several of these resolutions passed by the U.S. Congress level, and the one latest passed is 2014, resolution 341.
343.
343, yes. Also at each level of the state, local government, and I think at least 10 United States, the state government passed a resolution supporting the Falun Gong and condemning organ harvesting. So even in the European Parliament and the Canadian Parliament passed a similar resolution. I just gave you an example of that. So and street demonstrations is very popular in the rest of the world. And July 20th is the day, and the Falun Gong practitioner in Washington D.C., in New York, in lots of major cities in the world, they will have the peaceful parade and rally condemning organ harvesting and persecution.
It's basically the anniversary of the persecution.
Exactly. Yes. So, besides that, we also want to, the Falun Gong practitioner also want to bring hope to China. We don't want to just give them the picture of the persecution. The bad thing happened. We want to bring the people the idea, what is the good thing about China? What is the hope of this country? That's why we have Shenyang Performing Arts. And it started the world tour, I think in 2009, right? 2008?
2000.
Around that time, I think. Yeah, around that
13
time.
years ago, basically.
Exactly. Basically, because we all know that the Chinese government, they want them to be the only one that represent the Asian culture, the real China. But we know they are not. Their Communist Party ideology, the atheism, and all the violence and the lies, they're not the true. It's not the true China. China has 5,000 years traditional culture, and we always believe in God and believe in heaven and hell, and we always believe to be a decent person. And the Chinese government, the party's ideology, their culture is about the violence and the lies. How they could even represent China? So the Falun Gong practitioner group, they based in New York, they organized the artists who were willing to dedicate it to this this mission. And now there's several of this performance group simultaneously travel around the world to spread real, authentic Chinese culture, which only that group is represented true culture with the peacefulness, forbearance, and compassion, the kind of very positive values which can be accepted by the whole world, not the party culture.
Yes.
So it is a very meaningful thing to do because it's not only disclose the persecution, the bad things about the party. It gives the Chinese people, also give the whole Western world an idea, a picture of what the China is supposed to be. That is the goal of all the Chinese people. We want China to be back to our tradition, or back to our glory time, and it's very meaningful. So it will be in Boston. That's in April.
Why don't you hold one of them up for the viewers? One of the pamphlets.
Yeah.
Just show it.
Yeah, this is in Boston, the Wayne Theater. So this will be in April. So I think it's April 11 to 19th. 9 of the 9 shows totally. So go to get a ticket.
Yeah, and then they will be in Worcester, and they also will be in Portland,
Portland.
Maine.
Yeah. So yeah. And what else can practitioner do? Oh, nowadays the Falun Gong practitioners taking advantage of the internet media, the YouTube, and we have lots of the internet program and the Facebook to spread the information about human rights related information to the rest of the world, and especially we focus on the recent human rights crisis like the Wuhan virus outbreak, and it shows how corrupted the Chinese government is, and tell the rest of the world the truth that how Chinese government cover the Wuhan virus truth and try to deceive the rest of the world, and all the rest of the world suffer because of that. And there's lots of topics the Falun Gong practitioners talking about through the Facebook and the YouTube and all these internet medias. And I think even in the university level, the Falun Gong practitioners organize lots of seminars and roundtable discussions and spread the truth to the universities. And we all know that universities in the United States are the big target for the Chinese government to infiltrate, try to influence our American scholars and American next young generations
That's right.
to support the Chinese ideology and to support China, to favor the Chinese government. And all these younger generation students will be the future main population in United States. Some of them will work for the government, be the future leader. If the Chinese government have the long-term plan to influence this young generation, so the whole American future controlled by them, by the Chinese government. They have very tricky long-term plan for that. And they also plan to steal the technologies from United States and bribe, corrupt our scientists. And the Chinese scientists working for the United States companies and government. And they have a plan called 1,000 Talent, right? A plan called 1,000 Talent Program. Basically, it's also called 2025, if you've heard that. 2025, they want to make sure that the China controlled all the most advanced technologies and steal the patents. And they want to dominate the world by 2012 or 2025. And luckily, and I think our government, federal government, recognize their strategies and start to fight back. And I hope it's not too late. And as a Falun Gong practitioner, we will do our best through our voice to warn the American people the danger is coming and from the Red China. And we all want to work together to fight for a free China. I think that this is the goal for everyone in the world, because we know the threat is not only for the Chinese people. The threat is to everyone in this world. If you want to live in a free world, if you don't want your freedom, democracy being threatened, and we better to work together to conquer this risk.
Okay, I want to add a